I'm Gabriela, and at 35, my life was supposed to be the image of perfection everyone idealizes. Married for 10 years to Daniel, a good man, dedicated to his work and to a meticulously planned routine, I lived in a beautiful house in the suburbs of Imperatriz, with a garden that Daniel cultivated with the same precision with which he organized our finances. Our marriage, to the outside world, was a model of stability, almost a work of art of cohesion and predictability. But inside, I felt the hollowness, the emptiness that expanded each day, filling the space where there should once have been passion and spontaneity. There were no shouts, no arguments, just a comfortable silence that had transformed into an invisible barrier between us. That silence, which, over time, seemed to suffocate any remnant of the vibrant woman I once was. Our dinners were punctuated by conversations about bills, house plans, small renovations. Kisses, once ardent, became seals of commitment, performed almost out of obligation, without the flame that once united us. I found myself observing couples in the mall, in restaurants, with that sparkle in their eyes, the complicity that manifested itself in a fleeting touch, a shared laugh, and a pang of envy twisted my stomach. Where was my sparkle, my uninhibited laughter? My days became a repetition of functions, my work as a graphic designer, household chores, lukewarm attempts to rekindle something with Daniel that always ended in a, "I'm tired, honey." It was as if life had turned into a well-rehearsed play where everyone knew their part, but the soul of the performance had vanished. I felt trapped, not by visible chains, but by expectations, by an image of perfection that I myself had helped build, and which now suffocated me. The freedom, the spontaneity, the adventure that youth promised seemed to have been left behind, stuck in a dusty photo album.
The seed of change, or rather of rupture, was planted in a night photography course I started to try and retrieve some breath of creativity in my life. I always loved capturing moments, the beauty of the ephemeral, and Daniel, in his practicality, encouraged me, as it would be good for the mind. It was there that I met Raphael. He was the instructor, a man in his early 40s with slightly disheveled graying hair and eyes that carried the depth of someone who had seen and felt a lot. His voice was husky, and every word about light, shadow, and composition seemed charged with contagious enthusiasm. From the very first day, the photography class became my refuge. Raphael didn't just teach techniques, he made me feel the art, the life in every frame. He saw me in a way I hadn't felt seen in a long time. Our gazes met with an intensity that made me blush, a sense of recognition that was both exciting and terrifying. I talked about my projects, about my forgotten aspirations, and he listened, truly, with an attentiveness Daniel rarely gave me. This was a space where I could be Gabriela, the dreamy artist, not Gabriela, the impeccable wife and homemaker. The attraction between us was undeniable, a magnetic field that pulled us towards each other. Our first moment alone happened after a class, when the rest of the students had already left. I was tidying my things, and he approached, offering to help me. The conversation flowed so naturally, so lightly, that hours seemed like minutes. We talked about everything but what should have been obvious, the sexual tension growing between us. He shared stories of his travels, of bold photography projects, and I found myself smiling, genuinely laughing, with a joy I hadn't felt in a long time. That loud, uninhibited laugh that Daniel seemed to have forgotten how to awaken. The barrier broke on a rainy afternoon when the class was canceled due to an unforeseen event, and Raphael invited me for coffee at a small bistro nearby. The smell of fresh coffee and wet earth filled the air. The unpretentious conversation about art and life made me increasingly engaged. He mentioned a book of poems I loved, a detail Daniel would never know about me. That act of active listening, of remembering something so particular, awakened a deep gratitude in me, almost a feeling of being understood for the first time. He extended his hand across the table, and mine, without hesitation, met his. The touch was an electric shock, an awakening for skin that was thirsty for a different kind of affection, for a connection that wasn't routine. His fingers were warm and firm, and he intertwined them with mine with a delicacy that gave me goosebumps. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I knew the barrier I had built around my heart was about to crumble. The decision to cheat on Daniel was not a bolt from the blue, but the culmination of a slow process. There was no eureka moment, but rather a series of unanswered whys, of unfulfilled voids. I wasn't trying to destroy my marriage, but to rediscover myself. Raphael, with his presence and his way of seeing me, became the mirror in which I saw the woman who had been lost. The first kiss with Raphael was in the photography studio, late at night, after everyone had left. The soft light of the desk lamp cast long shadows on the wall, creating an intimate and almost clandestine setting. Our hands sought each other, and when our lips finally met, it was as if a dam within me broke. It wasn't a furtive, guilt-ridden kiss, but a silent scream of soul, body, life. The taste of his mouth was a mixture of coffee and something intoxicating, something wild and forbidden that I had never experienced. That kiss led us down a path of no return. One night, after an extra class on lighting, he walked me to my car. The fine rain wet our hair, and the cold of the night seemed to intensify the flame between us. He invited me into his apartment, a bohemian and welcoming space, with stacked books and photos hanging everywhere. The invitation was implicit, but the permission was mutual. Inside, the light was even softer, filtered by heavy curtains. He put on some low music, a jazz tune that filled the air. We talked for a few more hours, but the tension was palpable. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, a mixture of fear and excitement. At one point, he approached, and his fingers gently traced the line of my jaw, moving down to my neck. The touch was light, but laden with clear intent. When his lips met mine again, there was no more hesitation. It was a slow, deep kiss, exploring every curve, every taste. His hands pulled me closer, and my body responded with an urgency I didn't recognize. With each touch, each caress, I felt parts of myself awakening, sensations I had buried under routine and indifference. His body was strong and warm, and the contrast with the softness of his voice was an exciting mystery. When our bodies finally united, it was like a rebirth. It wasn't just sex. It was a fusion of souls, a cry of freedom that echoed in every fiber of my being. With each kiss, each shiver, I felt like I was reclaiming pieces of myself that had been forgotten, buried. The passion was raw, visceral, and I surrendered to it with an intensity I never knew I possessed. In that embrace, I wasn't just Gabriela. I was desire. I was me, the whole free woman. That first encounter was the beginning of a series of secret meetings. Every time I met with Raphael, it was as if I reconnected with a more authentic and vibrant version of myself. I felt alive, desired, seen. The freedom I found in those arms wasn't just the freedom of a betrayal, but the freedom to be who I was, without masks, without the weight of expectations. Guilt, to my surprise, was a fleeting feeling, quickly replaced by a euphoria that filled me from within. I wasn't hurting Daniel, or at least, that wasn't the primary intention. I was saving myself. Life at home continued its predictable routine, but I was different. My gaze had a renewed sparkle, my posture was more upright. Daniel, absorbed in his own affairs and distractions, didn't notice the change, or if he did, he didn't comment. I was living a double life, but I didn't feel hypocritical. For the first time in a long time, I felt complete. I was nourishing the part of me that had withered, and that, somehow, gave me the strength to deal with whatever came next. The surprising ending came from where I least expected it. A few months later, the company where Daniel had worked for 15 years, to which he had an almost blind loyalty, underwent a drastic restructuring. Daniel, the model employee, the pillar of stability, was laid off. It was a shock for him, who had always believed in the security of that corporate family in which he had invested so much. For me, it was a moment of apprehension, but also of a strange clarity. The security we had built, based on his professional stability, was as fragile as any other illusion. Daniel entered a spiral of discouragement. He closed himself off, depression slowly setting in. I tried to support him, offer words of comfort, but he seemed distant, lost in himself. During this period, Raphael was my safe harbor. He listened to my anxieties, gave me advice, and reminded me of my own strength, my capacity for resilience. "You're a diamond under pressure, Gabriela," he once told me, quoting something my grandmother used to say. Divorce was inevitable, but not in the way I expected. One day, Daniel called me to talk. He was pale, with deep, dark circles under his eyes. "Gabriela," he began, his voice choked, "I know we're distant, not just now, but for a long time. This layoff has made me see things from a different perspective. I lost myself in work, and I lost you in the process." My heart ached. He was acknowledging the emptiness, the distance, something I had felt for years. He continued, "I don't know what happened to us, but I know we're no longer the same people who got married. I don't want to tie you to a life that doesn't make you happy." He proposed divorce to me, not as an accusation, but as an act of mutual liberation. That moment, which should have been painful, was tinged with a strange sense of relief. There was no anger, no recriminations about my infidelity, as he was unaware of it. There was just a silent acceptance that something had died between us long before I found solace in another's arms. The irony was that Daniel's layoff, such a devastating event for him, had become the catalyst for the freedom I had been secretly seeking. The divorce process was civilized, almost friendly. There were no major assets to dispute, just the house and some savings. Daniel insisted that I keep the house, as it was where I had built my life, my home. It was an unexpected act of generosity, which made me see the good man he always was, despite our lack of connection. From then on, my life took a new direction. I continued with the photography course, now with an even greater purpose. My graphic design agency, which I had built with effort, prospered. With the house and newfound freedom, I began to invest more in myself, in my dreams. Raphael became my partner, not only in art, but in life. Our relationship was built on the solid foundation of honesty and the desire to live fully. He was my support, my accomplice, but never my crutch. I had found freedom by myself, and he was just a wonderful part of that journey. A few months later, during a photo shoot in the Lençóis Maranhenses National Park, under the strong sun and blowing wind, Raphael proposed to me. The scenery was breathtaking, with the white dunes and blue lagoons stretching to the horizon. It was a place of vastness, of infinite possibilities, just like the freedom I felt. There was no weight of family expectations, no social pressure, just the certainty that we were building something genuine and vibrant. The wedding was simple, at a small farmhouse near Imperatriz, with the presence of friends and family who truly supported me. My grandmother Eleanor, with her wise eyes and proud smile, was the first to hug me. "You are a diamond that shone even brighter, my dear," she whispered, and I knew she saw beyond appearances, beyond judgments. I invited Daniel, and to my surprise, he attended. He looked different, more serene, and wished me all the happiness in the world, a gesture of maturity that brought me immense peace. My story is not an apology for infidelity, but a reflection on the search for one's own truth. I cheated on my husband, yes, but above all, I betrayed the version of myself that was imprisoned by a life without passion, without sparkle. The freedom I found did not come from breaking a vow, but from the courage to look inward, to recognize the emptiness, and to seek to fill it with authenticity, even if it meant going against the world's expectations. It was a painful journey in many respects, but one that led me to a life where I was, finally, the protagonist of my own story, and not just a character in a predetermined script. And that, I realized, was true freedom.